You're listening to Two Chunks and a Hunk, a movie podcast where we give pumps and dumps.
Hello and welcome to Two Chunks and a Hunk. My name is Jordan Wonders, and this week I'm your hunk.
I'm Doge, and make your life chunky.
I forgot Voldemort was in this.
Yeah.
And I'm Carter. No matter what anybody tells you, words and ideas can chunk the world.
Yes, they can.
Don't forget that.
Never.
Hey, remember a second ago?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Why?
Why you honk?
I am the hunk. Actually, it was Doge's idea to make me the hunk
Aw.
this week.
That's the kind of power I wield over this podcast,
That's
guys.
it. That's the one.
Carter doesn't know this yet. So
Hunks rise and fall at my command.
I'm back on my like eating healthy, losing weight grind.
Nice.
I'm back on it again.
Yay.
And the other night, Doge and Jess were over to watch Bachelor in Paradise, and I was hungry. And so I went for my new snack that I had invented but not yet tried, which was baby carrots dipped in sriracha. Pretty simple.
Oh, nice.
And Doge said, that sounds disgusting. And I said, I think it sounds pretty good, but I haven't tried it yet. I tried it, and it was amazing.
Really good?
And it's so good. It's the sweet and the spicy and the salty together. Oh, it's perfect. But Doge said, how is it? I said, it's great. And he said, I know you, and I know you would say it's good even if it was terrible. And I said, the truth of that is irrelevant. I can't confirm or deny whether I'm that type of person.
Let's be real. He's that type of guy. Right, Carter?
No, don't put me in this.
You know him.
I don't know anything.
I pay for counseling to be less like that type of person. Thank you very much. But I said, how about you try? And Doge, I'm going to let you take over from here.
I tried it and was instantly convinced of the validity of this snack.
It's so good.
It's very good.
Did it just come to you?
Well, it came to me out of necessity first because it was
What are
like,
the two things I have right now?
well, it was more along the lines of like, if I'm starving, but because I'm doing a calorie counting type situation, carrots are super low calorie, sriracha is 0 calories. So it was like, boom, that's a perfect combination. Let's just see if it's good because I love sriracha and I like baby carrots.
What other 0 calorie things can we just mix together?
Yeah, basically it was just like, what's the lowest possible?
Later that week, so last week, I went to the store and specifically to buy baby carrots and sriracha sauce.
Yeah, he sent me a picture and he said, look what you've done to me.
Amazing. I have a giant bottle of Valentina sauce because that was the only size left.
Yeah.
I might do the same.
Hey, side note, speaking of sauces, I'm going to go ahead and evangelize for this other sauce real quick. Trader Joe's makes this sauce called Green Dragon.
Oh, dude, I know exactly what you're talking
it's
about.
so good. It's like garlicky, spicy. It's almost salsa.
Yep.
It's like if sriracha and salsa had a baby. It's right in the middle of those two things.
Should we have a food podcast?
Maybe.
We have a lot of opinions about that
We
stuff.
talk about food almost every episode. We're kind of, think of our name. We're kind of a...
I don't think we have to change our
We're
podcast.
basically a food podcast
Let's
now.
just add it to like the titles on
What
iTunes.
you munching?
Yeah.
What you mention?
Well,
that's hunky.
And I was munching this particular snack, baby carrots and sriracha, while we were watching something very special that we're going to talk about.
Does anyone else have a problem with certain things that are meant to be consumed having baby in the name?
yeah, I don't love that, actually.
Infant carrots.
Okay, baby's fine.
That's worse. Yeah, infant's worse.
Carrots that had a bright future until I chomped them up.
Oh my gosh.
You don't know that. You don't know that the future was bright for that carrot.
That's true. That carrot was going to grow up and go to jail. Good thing I ate it.
Hold up. Do you ever think about the genocide that is the chicken and egg sandwich at Chick-fil-A?
No.
Everybody, it's let's just wipe them off the face of the earth.
Exactly. We're going to...
It's a whole family.
We're going
everybody.
to cook your flesh and serve you underneath the cooked remains of your unborn young.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah, that's
dude.
brutal.
We're about
the
to have to get an explicit title for this one.
It's honestly the most metal thing that you could do.
It's metal. That's what it is.
And
We
I'm
have
gonna
made Adam, the producer of the podcast, cough in the background of
guess
the
what,
room.
chickens? I'm going to smash that up with little bits of bone that are coming out of my head and then use a meat tentacle to push it down my throat. where the acid inside of me is going to reduce it to nothing, and then I'm going to just drop it off like it never happened. That's how much I care about you, chickens.
That's so creative.
Is anybody else real hungry now? Anybody else starving? Hey, straight up, I'm actually going to Chick-fil-A tonight for a cheat meal.
Yep.
Because I got to put that new mac and cheese in my face.
I've heard about
mac and
it.
cheese?
People,
Did you not
I'm getting
hear about
thumbs
this?
up from Adam.
Whoa.
Apparently, it's delicious.
I've heard.
It's like a
I
baked
heard
mac
from
and
other
cheese, isn't
people
it?
before I heard from Chick-fil-A, which is a big deal.
Really?
Yeah, I had a friend, Eric Niederhauser, reached out to me. Maggie, who's like one of the biggest chunkies that we have, her husband was like, go get the mac and cheese. Like any group text I was in, like he was like, go get the mac and cheese. So there you go.
I'm on this real like spicy kick. I mean, I'm kind of in a perpetual state of being on a spicy food kick.
Same,
but
same.
They have this honey sriracha sauce at Chick-fil-A that I feel like I want to dunk. What am I looking for?
Dunk.
Dump.
Yeah.
There's the word. Dump into the mac and cheese.
You could straight up do Chick-fil-A mac and cheese and Wendy's spicy nuggets and get like a fast food zeitgeist
Do you know
type of meal.
This is so perfect. So Chelsea and I, my wife, are both about to go. She's going up to Norman, Oklahoma to see a friend of ours. And then I'm going down to San Antonio to do a fantasy football draft. Anyways, we're trying to, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, clean out the fridge, eat what we can, make some kind of shepherd's pie of everything that's left.
Yeah.
So we have some mac and cheese that she made, classic Kraft mac and cheese. But then we have some left over from tacos that we had made, ground green chili, onion, garlic, turkey meat.
Yes.
Yep.
I will mix these two and then put Valentina sauce in. Now,
Yes, you will.
you've let me know what I'm doing for lunch.
Ooh.
Doesn't that sound good?
That sounds great.
I'm really so hungry right now.
We are dangerously close to actually for real becoming a food podcast.
I think it's because we're putting off talking about this movie just a little bit.
Yeah.
I know.
We want the bright spot to last for just a minute before we dive into this.
Let's tell everybody what we're reviewing.
This week on Two Chunks and a Hunk, we are in fact reviewing the movie known as Dead Poets Society. Guys, this was my first time watching this.
Mm-hmm.
You did not prepare me for this movie.
That's the thing. Like I don't know if it was, would you have appreciated that?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No, I would have considered it a major spoiler for
And
any sort of warning.
Before we even get into the synopsis, I'm glad this is a part of back to school.
Yeah.
Because honestly, like junior high and high school is kind of an incubator for your life spiritually, physically, mentally.
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes it's great. And then sometimes, I mean, I think, I don't know how we would define the real world, but you hear that kind of stuff all the time. But you start to really discover that some things kind of suck around that age.
Yeah.
And you do see movies like Mean Girls, which we'll have next week, come in and say, let's just all laugh about how much it sucked.
Right, because it's bad, so let's just make fun of it.
But then you have a legitimate dramatization of this gets pretty deep, and it can move you two different directions.
I did not realize how big of a whiplash we were creating with the end of the back to school season. Because I had never seen this movie, I didn't know that we were creating such a like hard, like right to
I feel
left.
like
Did we go straight from Twilight into Green Book? Because I'm trying to figure out if we've ever had this big of a whiplash.
I don't know.
Week to week on the show.
This
before.
is barely this is basically a Splinter Cell neck snap.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know where else we could have put it because it feels less appropriate at the first or end.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
So it needed to be somewhere in the middle.
I'm happy with the placement because I think after this we're going to need the pick me up that is Mean Girls.
Absolutely.
Now that being said, this is my type of movie, man.
Yeah.
I know we're talking about how dark this is.
I figured it would be,
but like the sort of bleak realness of this.
we've got. I know you and I, with our chooser's choice, I had Gladiator and Alien, and you had Prisoners and Arrival.
Right.
Okay. Like, thank God we had someone with Spielberg to come in and just make us feel like kids again. But yeah, it just is a good movie. And sometimes good movies are the ones that seem most like reality.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think there's it's a bell curve almost of like the most grounded movies can be so good, and then the least connected to reality can also be very good in different ways.
And I think that's why for School of Rock, we had to buy the poster, all three of us, because it came in packaged as something that you felt like was not going to have much density at all. But it did.
Right.
And it was still thoughtful. And so we've got a lot of good teachers in this series. Well, we didn't have one we didn't have one for Ferris, but
True. So I want to say as we're jumping into this, the movie starts and right away, all I could think of
synopsis
was that Doge needs to give us a synopsis, and then I forgot how our podcast works.
Well, we got derailed with mac and cheese and sriracha and carrots.
That's true. Hey, Doge.
Baby food.
Before I do the thing I was going to do, how about you do the thing that you're going to do with the synopsis?
Yes, sir. This week's synopsis comes from IMDb user JWelch5742. A new English teacher, John Keating, is introduced to an all-boys preparatory school that is known for its ancient traditions and high standards. He uses unorthodox methods to reach out to his students who face enormous pressures from their parents and the school. With Keating's help, students Neil Perry, Todd Anderson, and others learn to break out of their shells, pursue their dreams, and seize the day.
There you go. Carpe diem.
Carpe diem.
Carpe diem.
Carpe diem, be extraordinary, is considered one of the top lines in American cinema.
Yeah.
It's like top 100.
It's very good. It was very powerful.
Yeah, very much.
So what I was going to say about the beginning of this movie before I so rudely was an idiot.
So rude of you, dude.
So rude of me to be dumb. I'm trying to interject lightheartedness into this episode wherever possible. And all I could think of with the name of this school, Welton, was Chilton from Gilmore Girls. Still on my Gilmore grind.
Yeah, good.
And very much private school with Chilton and Welton. Ha ha. No, it's a funny one instead of a serious one. Ha ha. We did it. No, the beginning of this movie, so accurate. I have a love-hate relationship with school. We were just talking about this before we started.
Yeah.
The beginning of this so accurately represents for me what going back to school was always like, I love that I get to see all my friends, but this is awful. Like the feelings of
this, and we're supposed to feel that way, but this school sucks.
Right. Yeah.
It's like bad Hogwarts.
Dude, it is like bad Hogwarts.
Yeah.
Especially, there's a scene where they throw on robes and they run out to that.
Yeah.
And I was like, what house are they at? This is great.
It's bad Hogwarts.
Yeah. It really is.
Yeah. Private school, I should have looked up, and I don't know if it would have been anywhere out there in research, but I wonder how many high school movies are set in a private school. There's something really unique about that experience.
Yeah. Especially a boarding school.
Private boarding school.
A boarding school, yeah. So like Matilda are some things that come to mind in terms of
I can think of 8 of them that are about wizards.
Yeah, sure. At least.
Yeah. but
Matilda, Harry Potter, Dead Poet Society.
That's it.
We found them all.
There it is.
10.
Those are my 10 favorite school movies.
Not a movie, but Zoe 101 was technically a boarding school.
There it is.
And I wanted to go to that school so bad. I remember that they had sushi for lunch.
No way.
At a school.
No way.
It's a big one.
That's my job for this episode, is just interjecting.
You're the food guy.
I'm the food guy. That's my thing. So as we're being introduced to this school and people's family dynamics and sort of who they are as characters, we're introduced to Robin Williams as, is it John Keating?
Yes.
Yeah, John Keating, who former student, come back, taught in London. Now he's here. Dude, where is this set?
Delaware.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I realized that.
They were going to have it set a little further south in the continental U.S., but they wanted snow. They didn't want to pay what the budget would ask for fake snow. So they said, let's actually go somewhere where it might actually snow.
Right.
So Delaware it was.
You totally get the New England vibes, especially with the transcendentalist poets that they reference so frequently.
Oh, yeah.
That's all that Massachusetts area.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to brag. I went to Walton Pond about a year ago. Yeah, it was amazing. Very cool.
That's really cool.
Yep.
And who's from New Hampshire? There's someone who had a farm in New Hampshire. Ooh, my roommate, my best man at my wedding, Tommy Fancotch, would be so mad at me right now.
Is he listening right now, just elbowing you?
Probably not. I'm mad at him for not even listening to my podcast. It's not Thoreau, but it's Emerson, I think, actually has a farm in New Hampshire. So yeah, New England is a big
hotbed of transcendentalist poetry.
That's what it's known as.
A lot of literature
when you cross the border,
general.
it says it on the sign. Yeah.
There's just a ton of authors and poets and writers that are from that area. I wonder what that is.
Where are all the words that are there?
Well, that's why
naturally occurring.
Stephen King is from Maine and sets a ton of his stories up in that area of the United States. It's strange.
There it is.
Interesting. I think this area has a certain charm to it. I really do. I tend to really enjoy movies that are set in the Northeast.
Yeah.
It's very, I don't know. It's like small town, but not small town. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah.
It's interesting for us, I think, as Americans.
Yeah.
Because that's about as historic as it gets for us.
True.
Yeah.
Like, that's our Rome. Isn't that weird? Doesn't that sound
I think that's
lame?
why I like Boston so much.
That sounds so lame because I've been to Rome. And
Yeah,
I was like, oh, this part of Rome is much lower below sea level than the other part of Rome because people have walked on it for 2,000 years. Oh,
wow.
That's where the hills come from. Chariots. Oh.
So I want to talk about the boys, the core group, the Dead Poets Society. So we can get to story in a little bit, but one of the things that I was so caught off guard by and that really made me love this movie is we have a movie here written and made in the late 80s, set in the 50s, that's about friendship between young men that is based on like encouragement of creativity.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. That's a great point.
I don't think that you see that a lot, especially from that era. But like, there were multiple times in this movie where I was expecting it to go the way of you're getting roasted for being vulnerable about something that you're passionate about. And instead it was like, yeah, dude, you go, you do the thing.
Yeah. And even though Todd, which I think is Ethan Hawke's character, even though he's kind of the new guy in this, it's not really centered around his story. It's centered around a cohort, which that in general makes you feel like it's so this movie's shot chronologically.
Right.
If y'all read that. And it's for the sake of these guys. And I think the director even had them living together.
He did.
To try and build that camaraderie.
Well, and so obviously, spoilers if you haven't watched the movie, don't know why you'd be listening if you hadn't, but after Neil dies in this movie, he did not let that actor, I can't remember his name, he did not let him come back to set.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that the boys had to like
actually feel like he's gone.
Wow. Yeah, the movie does a lot of interesting stuff though in terms of protagonist's relationship with the plot.
Right.
In that we don't really have a singular protagonist. Like
the protagonist is the Dead Poets Society.
At first it looks like it's going to be Todd because he's new and it looks like we're going to get that fish out of water story. And then it maybe looks like Neil. It's going to be Knox and it's going to be his story with Chris. And then maybe it looks like it's going to be Neil, but it's kind of just jumping all over the place between everybody.
Can we talk about how Knox Overstreet is the biggest rich boy name I've ever heard in my entire life?
I was just about to bring up, I love names in storytelling.
I do too.
Knox Overstreet, Pitts, Meeks, like these, and Keating even brings it up. Right. How unfortunate.
Come, Mr. Meeks, it's time to inherit the earth.
Such a good line.
Oh my gosh. So many good lines. So this won an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay.
Good.
Okay.
Dead Poets Society was nominated for 4.
Okay.
And it won for Best Original Screenplay.
That's awesome.
Which I thought was deserved.
Absolutely.
Sure. No, I completely agree. I think that there's a lot of great performances here, but I definitely think that the story and script itself were the stars of the show.
Good job for the same guy who wrote Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Well, this director...
And What About Bob?
That's crazy.
This director also directed The Truman Show, which is an all-time favorite.
Yeah.
And it's sort of... So I want to talk a little bit about this movie in a broad sense very quickly.
Yeah.
It's so dreamy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm getting the vibe that maybe that was just an 80s aesthetic with Ferris Bueller. But like... Everything about this movie was like a dreamlike state. Like there were moments that were absolutely not reality. Like people's reactions and the things they would say were not something that a real person would do, but it never stood out in a bad way.
Yeah.
And I think it's because this whole movie just feels like an elevated sense of reality. Like it's just a little dreamlike, a little fantastical.
I think the movie asks us to buy in at the same speed that the boys do to the idea of the Dead Poets Society. And so if you don't buy in right when Keating is outside looking at the yearbook stuff,
pretty immediately.
If you don't immediately buy in when he says Carpe Diem, make your lives extraordinary, these guys are fertilizing daffodils right now. If you don't buy in the same way that the boys do, the movie doesn't work at that point.
Yeah.
So it asks a lot of the audience.
Yeah.
And there's just beautiful scenes too, like Knox going down that hill with all the geese flying away on the bike.
Okay, I was going to bring that up. I loved that scene.
Oh my gosh.
I was struggling with like who's my favorite boy in the group. I don't know.
Yeah.
I love them all.
Yeah, it was just, and that whole scene too was just like this romantic ignorance. Like, he had never really talked to this girl, but he's going as if he's going to go see his future wife for the first time, right? But I've felt that before.
Dude, I think that's the crux of this movie though, is that like romanticized ignorance, the like, of course you don't know anything. Of course you think that words can change the world, Then they're confronted with a really harsh reality.
Yeah.
And they have to choose, do I believe the stuff that I believed was worth living for before I found out that life was this? Or do I change? Do I let it break me?
Right.
Yeah,
well, and I think there's a sense of heightening with everything at that age.
Yeah.
But in this movie, I think it's then taken up another notch as well.
Yeah.
So,
well, and Keating's approach the whole time is so thoughtful. From the very beginning, he knew, like, the preamble needs to be, I need these young men to know they're not invincible.
Right.
To look at these ghosts in these cases
Here we go.
and be like, what are they saying to you? Like, your life is nothing right now. So, and there was the foreshadowing with Neil. They focused on Neil when he was reading about one day, or he said one day you'll just be cold and in the ground and fertilizer, basically. Yeah. So
there's a heavy, like a thick blanket of death over this movie. In like a very strange way.
Yeah. Did you read about Robin Williams' somber mood?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was going through a divorce at the time.
Yeah.
And so this is, and I remember that from seeing it the first time, that it was like, and he got an Oscar nomination for this, but it was just kind of like, he felt not off, but he wasn't super Robin Williams, but he is Robin. I don't know. I don't know how to describe it, but to hear that that's what he was going through made a little more sense to me. Because I guess I was grasping for why is it this way?
Right. Yeah. And I think that mood was maybe to his benefit as an actor for this role, but I mean it's hard when that stuff kind of crosses into your job, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I can't necessarily relate to that exactly, but I'm sure that is a tough like gap to bridge.
Yeah.
But the whole start of this movie is it really is fun, which I'm still, you have to remember, I just watched it for the first time, so I'm still kind of in recovery mode from this movie a little bit.
Yeah.
It feels disrespectful to call this movie fun, but it really is for the first part.
It is. It's
supposed to be.
Yeah.
You're getting to know these kids. You're getting to watch them and what they do. It even has some, like, hey, you're the man from School of Rock vibes with like Dead Poet Society, changing your name, all of these different things. But I gotta say, I really just loved watching these boys like spur each other on and encourage each other.
Sure.
It was so wholesome to me.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think one of the first classes we get, I think the first class that we get with Keating was, because it's hard to know exactly when some of this stuff happened outside of it being chronological, but the first class was him actually going to the trophy case. And I think the second one is when they start ripping the pages out of the books.
That is the second class.
Which is great. And I wish I could credit Dead Poet Society and John Keating to me wanting to be a professor. That's just not how things went. But I can credit to me wanting to be a better professor, and I couldn't help it. I'm not going to get super nerdy, but I think just like when Doge has the knowledge about Greek mythology during Hercules, I think as a professor, I'm writing, my dissertation is on the relationship between charisma and teaching effectiveness. And so for the longest time, there's like these 6 subsets of charisma, right? It's this thing of the gods, like charis meant like you inherit it, you can't learn it. But I'm trying to teach that you can,
right?
For the sake of, retention and better student-teacher relationships. Anyways, one of these 6 subsets has been going against the status quo. Like that is the sign of a charismatic leader in the classroom. And it's been hard for me to define that. But seeing this scene of Keating saying, rip out the page of your textbook, that's it. This was great for me. This was honestly good for my research. I can't cite Dead Poet Society in my dissertation, but I can say, oh, this is a little bit more tangible of what it means to go against the status quo. So he is essentially gaining the love and admiration of these young boys without really having an issue. Like he's not going to lose his job for this,
right?
But it is against the status quo. I mean, those pages are there and published for a reason. If they weren't supposed to be there, they wouldn't have been published. But he says, rip it out,
right?
Because this is what I think poetry is. And so that was really cool for me to see, and was just kind of an aha moment for me.
Yeah.
Which is great. And I say that to say one of the best things about Two Chunks is, and what I hope for some of the listeners is, and we've even seen some response to it, is like looking at this with a different lens. Like,
yeah,
we're movie guys, and that's the whole reason this podcast started. But when you look at it from a different lens and start to look at something like you do art and say, how does this relate to me?
Yeah.
You're going to get it'll make a massive impact. I promise.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's sort of the lesson that he's even teaching, which is funny that's where you're going. But like, I love the idea of, it's so funny to me, the idea of let's gauge a creative act by math. Let's take this chart, plot the area. That's how good of a poem this is. And I love that this movie starts by him saying, you have to break those shackles. Like you have to get rid of that because that is not what poetry is. That's not what creativity is.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of very similar to what you're saying of like, if you are looking at everything on some sort of a scale that you've created, you could really be missing something that is going to be meaningful and like could change you.
Yeah.
I mean, not to cast our very goofy podcast in the role of the central inspirational figure of this movie, but I think that's what we try to do, right? We talk a lot about like story structure and we're like, the relationship between protagonist and antagonist is all out of whack and it just kind of falls apart because of that. But when we do that, we're essentially plotting creativity on a graph.
Yeah.
And saying it's got to check these boxes. And we try, and sometimes are more successful than others, try to leave room for the magic alongside the craft, which is just the beauty of a piece versus the nuts and bolts of a piece.
Sure. Yeah, that's great.
And I think there's room for both.
Yeah.
But
yeah. And this scene was such a good representation too of probably his role at Welton for Keating. He's been given a textbook that he probably didn't have a choice. He had to inherit somebody else's textbook because
so now he's changing it
of the grip they have, administratively on that kind of stuff. And then he says, well, this is how I'll do it.
Right.
So, and that's why they love him, because we see this stuck up place and then you throw somebody in there, which we didn't have that, I think, at Hogwarts because it's the setting of it's fantasy.
Sure.
Some Defense Against the Dark Arts teachers were like that, I bet.
Yeah.
I feel like Lupin was like that.
I would say
I like him.
Lupin is probably the most John Keating professor that Hogwarts ever had.
I like it.
Yeah.
I'm glad we made this connection.
That's fair.
I like that a lot.
That's very good. Now, it's because of that kind of love and respect that they have for him pretty immediately that they are so eager to jump all over, hey, what is this Dead Poets Society?
That was almost a dump for me, how easy it was to get everybody on the same page.
Yeah.
But then I think for me, the reason it's not a dump is you think about these kids who've spent, I mean, what are they, seniors, juniors? They spent forever at this school and their number one, the first pillar they ever say is tradition. And so when somebody comes along who's like, hey, tradition is not that important. Yeah, of course they're going to respond positively.
Yeah.
No, and then they do at least give us one character that doesn't feel the same.
Yeah.
Right.
And he's kind of along for it too.
Yeah.
Little punk.
Well, there's something, jerk. There's something Goonies about this cave.
Yeah, it really is.
It's so distinctly 80s, the idea of let's all go hide in this cave and like we're only kind of doing poetry. Like I love that this club was only kind of about poetry and it was more, I think, him passing along this like you can't just be this in this school.
Yeah.
Like go get outside of these walls and do something.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the more I think about it, the more I think it's perfect that we have this and then Mean Girls. Because you've got it centered around a friend group of young men in a private school setting to where we're going to go to public school with these group of girls.
Yeah.
And that is a blast. And then we do, really we kind of spread ourselves a little bit too with Ferris Bueller, because there is that crew of like 2 or 3. Like these are my best buds. So we're going to go on these adventures together. But that's fun. I like that.
Yeah, well, and I think it's interesting because high school movies are made. It's made or broken. That feels weird to change the tense of that saying. The make or break of a lot of high school movies is the friend group. Yeah, it's the people that are around your main character, and in this one, the main character is the friend group. I don't know. It's an interesting dynamic, I think, but we get a lot that goes on as a result of this cave rather than in the cave,
right?
And one of those things, if we could jump around just a hair, is we watch some of these characters start to change. We get to watch Knox gain some courage to go talk to Chris.
Yep.
Yeah. And we watch Charlie, right?
Was he the one with the saxophone?
Yes.
Nwanda?
One of my favorite scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nwanda. Yeah. We get to watch Charlie sort of get a handle on his own, I don't know what word to call it. Rambunctiousness?
Rebellious streak.
Rebelliousness.
He gets to point his rebellious streak in the right direction.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think for me, a metaphor that stood out was kind of like when you get your license. Like, okay, now everyone can drive. At the root of it, that's what that means.
Right.
But some of us are going to do that to have a job. Some of us are going to do that to go fast and get like a rush from that. Right. You know, it's just like this was their next step in maturing, whether they decided to or not. You know,
this is the means, but they get to choose the end.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. No, it's very good. And we watch Todd, who's sort of our our surrogate for this movie. He's the new one in the new place. We get to watch him be.
Ooh, he doesn't say hardly anything, does he?
So Ethan Hawke barely talks in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why they don't call him Ethan Talk.
Right. It's actually, and this will be even more weird later, I think, for me, but it's my super dump.
Me too.
Really?
Okay.
Ethan Hawke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Which
I
is
love
weird
Ethan Hawke.
because of my super pump.
I think we probably have the same super pump is my guess.
Okay.
But we can get to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wanted more from him because I know what he's capable of.
He felt really green.
Yeah.
I think this was one of his first bigger roles.
Probably.
Again, he's in an ensemble, so it's not the biggest role.
Right.
But there was, I don't know, I think just him being naive in general as Ethan Hawke. Like there's certain things that they said, it was either the producer or the director. Someone's Australian on this production team.
Peter Weir, the director.
So did you read that trivia?
First.
So he was like, Ethan Hawke's like, why is he talking so funny? It's like the first Australian accent he's ever heard.
Right.
I don't know why it's like, that's not a thing. Like that's not a box you check in adolescence.
Right.
It's like, okay, go listen to an Australian.
Yeah.
Right. Now you're a man.
Now,
Okay.
you know, some people talk
birds
like
and
this.
bees, these are Australians.
Yeah.
You know, and
Birds,
so it was,
bees, and Aussies.
yeah, it was just so strange. But for that too, I was like, oh, I don't know why it was just reading that trivia that I was like, he's just really naive.
He's just a
right
baby.
now. And
He's just a baby.
A green, you know.
But yeah, I was just.
Oh, crap, guys. What's a baby hawk called? Quick.
Fledgling.
Fledgling. Ethan Fledgling.
Very good.
Got him.
But yeah, I'm glad. I'm interested that is also your super dump.
Mhm.
It just struck me as odd.
Well, and there's a strong scene later when they're in the snow post Neil's
Yeah, he was great.
death that he did great, but even still, I don't know. It just wasn't. It wasn't. I think we could have done better there.
I agree.
So, but fortunately, y'all, this entire series, I mean, we were already excited about Back to School, but I think right here in the middle of it, we're like, good grief. This is
Some
one
good
of
ones.
the better school setting series. Like this is one of the best we've ever done.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
these are good movies.
These are good
Such
ones.
a broad spectrum.
It is such a broad spectrum. I'm glad we spread ourselves a little bit.
Yeah. No, it's great. And there's a lot to talk about in the second half of this movie,
Oh yeah.
but there's also a lot to talk about in the second half of this podcast. And that'll be separated by what we're about to do. Which is
Very nice.
Sometimes I start a
I
sentence
love it.
with no idea.
But then you pull it off.
It's shout announcements. It's shout announcements.
Oh.
The part of the show where we give shout outs and make announcements. And I'm going to start that right now.
Do it.
Hey, we want to give a big fat shout out to Tyler Station because that's where we are.
That's where we are.
It's where we record and we love it. Thank you for letting us do it, even though you don't have much of a say. Also, we want to give a shout out to...
Is that a threat?
Yeah, what's going on? You shouldn't do that.
Uh-oh.
Hey, I'll slash your tires.
Tyler
Stop.
Station, we won't do that.
No,
We're very
we won't.
grateful.
You don't have tires. We are very grateful. Thank you, Tyler Station. Also, we want to give a big shout out to Crumb and Kettle.
Always.
Drinking my second cold brew of the day.
Dude, you're wild. And that's a big boy.
Yeah,
that's a
16
20
ounce,
ounce.
huh?
It's a big one. It's 16.
Oh, this is 12.
That's a
ounce.
40 ounce?
It's 16.
What?
Yeah. I'm
Wow,
drinking
dude.
90 ounces of cold brew coffee. at 6
Oh,
p.m.
you would die.
It's
You
a
lived
cold
through that.
gulp.
It's
Gross.
gross. It's a Route 64, whatever.
Get your kicks.
Get your kicks on Route 64.
Wow.
Also, we want to give a shout out to Podbean.
Yep.
We pay you money. We put stuff on you. Exclusively our podcast.
Podbean.
Podbean.com.
.com. Guys, we're at 186 reviews.
Woo!
We are but 14 away.
Oh my gosh.
Chunky's listeners, thank you so much. You continue to subscribe. We literally were just talking about how this continues to be surreal. There's a lot of people downloading our podcast, and it makes us very happy. Let me read our most recent review. And this will be the first time you guys have heard it, I think.
Uh-huh.
It's titled Truly Obsessed. My husband and I love this podcast. The hosts are the perfect combination of funny, intelligent, and communicative. It's the best thing to binge listen to on road trips, especially since they have multiple great series already out. The MCU and Disney ones are our faves. Some of our favorites too. It's also completely clean, which is an added bonus.
Squeaky.
Squeaky even.
Squeaky, you might
Just
say.
don't listen to Summer of Love. I've learned so much about being able to consume and critique movies just from listening to them.
Wow.
Now my hubby and I always do a super pump and super dump after we go to the movies.
Whoa, that's awesome.
I love that.
This is so cool.
She says, can't wait to continue listening. So
Wow.
That's so encouraging.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that kind of stuff is really, really fun.
Yeah, I love that.
So please continue to do that. We're 14 away, like from checking our last box. Now, I did not anticipate it happening this fast, but now it looks like all we'll have left to do is wait till we're 2 years old. And we're just terrible.
Much like humans.
Much like humans.
That's kind of what babies do. They just wait until they're 2.
Just kind of wait.
And they start doing stuff.
You
then
guys
they start
aren't
applying
even
to be
ready
certified
for
critics.
how terrible our 2s are going to be. Oh my gosh.
We're gonna grow so many teeth.
Oh, we're going to be teething. We're going to be learning to say no.
Ooh.
There's going to be some potty training involved. I mean, the 2s are going to be terrible for 2 chunks. The terrible 2s chunks.
We're just going to review Baby Geniuses every week. It's going to be all toddler-themed movies.
Well, it's just going to be Baby Geniuses and Look Who's Talking over and over again.
And Boss Baby.
Obviously. Hey, Boss Baby's not bad, actually.
No, this is when I say stop.
I don't believe that.
It's not bad. It really isn't.
I have a hard time believing that.
Sometimes this momentum gets going between Jordan and Doge, and I just have to stand there and be like, nope, please stop. No more. Don't do this.
I need a place to put my silly because it's certainly not in the meat of this episode.
Not in this very serious episode. Jordan, it's funny that you say that because I have the perfect container in which you may place your silly.
Tell me.
It's over here in the corner. And it's shaped like a chest in which one might put a buried treasure. Who could have put this chest in this room? Only the most September of historical figures.
Yes.
A pirate.
Oh! Arg. Matey?
You better start believing in pirate series, Doge.
You're one.
And you, listener, will be in one too.
What's it called, though?
Next month, the month of September on the Christian calendar.
Yeah. In a little bit of October. Just a
because
smidge of October.
that's a pirate thing to do.
In September of 2019, coming your way, blasting high speed across the open seas, a brand new 2 Chunks podcast series.
You're supposed to be doing it as he's doing this.
Shiver Me Septembers.
Oh, it's so good to finally let the world know.
We planned this at boy time, and this was a joke. We had another series planned for September.
Yes, we did.
And then we said, okay, we've got that idea. Now, let's set a 10-minute timer.
Let's beat it.
And try to beat it.
We did.
With 2 minutes left on the clock, Doge slam dunked Shiver Me Septembers.
Half joking. And then we said, you know what? Let's go to sleep. And if we wake up and still love the idea of Shiver Me Septembers, we'll do it.
Hey,
and
guess what,
guys?
We dreamed about pirates. That's what happened.
We loved. We're so excited to start talking about pirate movies.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you don't think that there's 4 pirate movies to put in a pirate series,
Well,
First of all,
what?
get real.
get real, because we kind of had to choose from more than 4. There was at least 5 or 6.
Yeah, it was a tough decision, actually.
But we're going to have things like Muppet Treasure Island.
Yes.
We're going to have some Hook.
Yes.
Obviously,
Classic.
Hook.
Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl.
The first one.
The good one.
And we're going to have a fun trip to a movie called Cutthroat Island. Which we'll get more on. Well, Cutthroat Island is one of the biggest flops of all time.
And because Cutthroat Island failed so bad at being a pirate movie, they also failed so bad at being a September pirate. And so that episode releases October 1st.
Yeah, they just keep missing the mark.
That's going to be, I mean, I'm talking Hallmark levels of bad, I think.
Yeah. It was like a $100 million budget in the early 90s, late 80s.
Made like $26.
Made not much.
Yeah.
So ended some careers, I think.
So stay tuned, me hearties.
So I know we've been talking a lot about Whiplash, and
it's a great movie starring J.K. Simmons and Miles Teller.
Shiver Me Septembers is going to be great, but I do want to slam the brakes.
Yeah, for sure.
The second half of this episode, we're going to get into the second half of the movie Dead Poets Society, and things get heavy. And we're going to talk about it as a movie, and I don't think we're going to hopefully spend a lot of time talking about the ins and outs of some of the emotional things that are happening. But it is heavy, and it's kind of real. And I know that Doge has something that he wants to talk through a little bit before we get back in, just to sort of put our flag firmly in the "we're with you and we love you and care about you" camp.
Yeah. So as we get into the second half of this movie, the specter of suicide does loom large over this. It's a huge plot point in this, and that ultimately is a part of this story, and unfortunately became a part of Robin Williams' story.
Yep.
And we as Two Chunks, we as your friends want to tell you that doesn't have to be part of your story.
Right.
If you feel like that's your only way out, we promise you that it's not. If you need somebody to talk to, please call the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. That number is 1-800-273-8255. And we're going to put that number in the show notes as well. But if you hear nothing else from this episode, hear us say that doesn't have to be your story. Your story doesn't end that way.
We're not naive enough to think that we're going to be the most important voice in anybody's life who's listening to this. But if you need to hear it, there's at least 4 people in this room that care deeply about you, whoever you are.
Yeah.
So I think that's why we feel the need to say that.
Yeah.
So things may get silly again. Things may get fun again. And we're heading back to the show. And now we're back to the show.
I could just tell by the way it felt in here that this is some real show energy in the studio.
Yeah.
This is not shout announcements
It's not shout
energy.
announcement. We're in the show
here
now.
and we're doing
Did
business.
you see my posture change?
I did.
I
I
went from
watched
shout
that.
announcements posture to show posture.
Did you see me raise my arms straight in the air like it's Mini Monday?
Like you just absolutely do not care.
I don't even begin to care.
Put
dude.
your hands in the air like it's Mini Monday.
That's what they
That's
say.
one of my favorite
I'm going to keep them up.
lines
I'm
from a
not.
rap song.
All right. Speaking of Whiplash, I have a scene I'd like to talk about.
I think it's the same one. I hope we're going there.
I think we definitely are.
Okay.
So there is a moment in this movie that resonated with me so hard and just like spoke to the creative process and spoke to the discovery of a skill set, spoke to the discovery of a passion. But more importantly than any of that to me, spoke to the power of somebody who believes in someone else. And that is the scene where Mr. Keating makes Todd stand up at the front of the class. And even though he did not write a poetry assignment, deliver a poem on the spot based on, was it Walt Whitman? It was a picture of Walt Whitman.
Uncle Walt. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Super pumped.
Yeah.
Yep.
You too?
No.
Oh, okay.
But yes.
I mean, it was powerful.
Oh, it was absolutely powerful. And this was why it was hard, probably for both of us. And we have the same super in this movie to say that Ethan Hawke might have been our least favorite part because he was a part of and did so very well. But I think it's because that same naivety that made me not attracted to him any other part of this movie was very appropriate for being molded by John Keating right now.
Well, and there's something, so obviously I want to let you talk about this as well since maybe we got different things, but there's something in this moment that is so especially poignant because there's nothing really great about his poem. It is good.
Yeah.
And it was poetic and it was from the heart, which is great. But it's not like he's revealing that he's got this like innate poetry inside of him.
His poem would tank on that graph that they have to draw at the beginning.
Right.
But it's still a good poem.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think what I like so much is my life has been molded in so many ways by older people who have looked at me and said, fine, I'll give you some of my time and I'll give you some of my input. And this scene is what that feels like sometimes. Yeah. Somebody older that's like, no, I'm not going to let you stop yourself. Go, push.
Yeah.
And like in that moment, I think we're supposed to take not that he is some like prodigy, but instead that he just found a passion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is just... It's so powerful. Oh my goodness. This scene just left me rattled.
Yeah. It's so revealing because he can articulate his character's inner thoughts, how he feels about being at this school where his brother was the valedictorian, like the biggest dude on campus.
Right.
And he feels like a nobody.
Yeah.
Right.
And when Keating has just let Todd just kind of take it over and he kind of comes down even to a knee to like just soak it in. Like one of the great things about this screenplay, which won the Oscar, was choosing, you could have had the character of Keating without the background of Keating. You could have had somebody come in that had no association with this school or had not had this exact experience with the book that he used here in his, his pictures in the yearbook. But the fact that he's there and he does something that I think a lot of us wish we could do more of, but it's too late to be able to like contribute back to something that made an influence on us directly.
Yeah.
To go back into that very setting and be like, I know what these people are going through because I lived it.
And I know what they need right
now.
Yeah.
And then so just for him to have that moment. And good grief, Robin Williams was so talented.
Oh my goodness.
You wouldn't be surprised to hear that he won a Best Actor, or Best Supporting Actor. He's won an Oscar.
For Good Will Hunting.
Right? You wouldn't be surprised to hear that he has the same amount of Oscar wins as Leo DiCaprio, because it's a big deal that Leo's got one.
Right.
He's almost got the same amount of nominations as Leo DiCaprio, and that's more of a surprise. So he's had 3 Best Actor nominations, which this was one of them, and a Supporting Actor win. So he's been nominated 4 times for an Oscar, and I think it's hard to define him. And I think that's why he was so special, because yes, he's this ridiculous stand-up comedian that kind of crossed over into this world, but he kind of made both worlds. Like the fact that you could have a conversation as to what really was he known for, and you could have 2 polarizing sides to that, 2 completely different sides, blows my mind. And I can't really think of anyone else.
Yeah.
Like that. Now
you have articulated it better than me. For that reason, Robin Williams is my super pump for this movie.
Yeah.
Great.
He's incredible. Like it's just on a completely different level than I think anyone else is able to do. He does what only he can do in this movie.
Right.
Yeah, there is something about that's so fascinating to me. And it goes back into kind of the nerddom of me talking about charisma and stuff. My whole interest in charisma started with humor, because I was really interested in my grad work of like, why is humor even I don't know, why is it this phenomenon? Like, why does it mean, like, if you're funny, that can put you ahead of someone else politically. Like, someone, you might have millions of people who vote for you because you made them laugh. And this is kind of a big deal. You know, it's like when you would see the difference between like McCain had more experience than Obama in a political race, right? And this has nothing to do with political views. I usually don't even get into talks like this. This is strictly communication-wise. Yeah. Unfortunately for McCain, who's a POW, who had this tons of experience, he was kind of stiff in the way he delivered things.
Right.
But then you had Obama, who was charming and was making people laugh and eventually won the nomination. And so these kind of things happen all the time. And so humor, to me, was really interesting. And I think a lot of the times we see comedians that are really good at drama because they're more one and the same than we think they are.
Right, yeah.
Because comedians have this incredible lens and magnifying glass on the morbidity of the world and everything that's awful in the world. I remember when SNL decided after 9/11, we got to keep going.
Right.
And we've got to do something past this, because these two don't juxtapose. Actually, there's so much. I think a lot of that is to credit. I'm not going to do this whole thing of like trying to dissect why Robin Williams is a good dramatic actor, but I think you can credit a lot of really knowing what life is about to being a comedian, as ridiculous as that sounds, right? I
agree.
Yeah.
So, I was just blown away by the scene. Sure. And it's something that, it's one of those, there's scenes like Jack Black has in School of Rock that I could watch over and over and over again. And then there's ones like this that are like, one's good for me emotionally.
Yeah. Right.
Like, this is powerful and I'm going to put it back on the shelf
It's
now.
a vitamin versus a vaccine.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
That's such a good way to put it. But yeah, this scene is just phenomenal. Of all the time, there's just so many little things that Keating does that I love. Like the very first time we see him, he just whistles through the class.
Yeah.
It's like,
which was great.
Come on. You know, like there's stuff I'm learning in faculty workshops that's like, there was one table where students were saying what they appreciate from a professor. And Keating, like, has done all 10 of these things. Some of it is like, change my perspective, relate to me, literally have me move around. I'm tired of sitting. So he does that the first class. He does all 3 of these things. Yeah. And it's just really good. And the fact that this was written, so I think it's the writer that had a professor that was kind of like this.
Yeah, at a boarding school in Nashville.
And then Robin Williams approached it as if he wanted to portray the professor he always wanted to be.
He wanted to have.
Or he wanted to have, right. Yes. And so it's good. There was so much thoughtfulness put into this role, and it's delivered so well.
Yeah. Doge, do you have anything to add since he's your super pump?
I don't. I mean, I feel like I do have stuff to add, but I mean, what else can you say, really?
Right. Yeah. No, that's good. Now, I know where we'll probably spend a lot of time for the second half, but I do want to say almost my super dump. There's some problematic guy-girl relationship things going on in this movie.
Yeah.
Particularly, I mean, you can write it off as the times, but we don't want to excuse those things.
Sure.
You know, the party with the unconscious Chris on the couch and the forehead kiss. Now, we can always say it could have been worse because, of course, but still not great.
But it definitely could have been better.
Yeah, it was kind of cringy a little bit.
Not great.
Speaking of that party and like seeing teens in the 50s and like this movie does a bad job at being in 1959.
Yeah.
There is so much stuff like the plastic wrap on the desk set that Todd gets was not invented until 1972.
Wait, really?
The cadence that the drummers are playing was written in like the 60s. They're rapping They have no context for that. It's 1959. Like, there is so much of this.
Oh, I think Ice Cube was around in 1959.
There is so much of that. He was still part of the glacier at that point. But there's so much of this that is just not at all in the 50s. And that's going to be my super dumb.
Yeah, like, dude, that's totally it's just like warranted.
We did not pay attention to this.
Accidental.
Totally warranted.
Anachronistic or whatever.
Yeah, and I couldn't put a finger on it, but you've completely like given it context.
Just not. It's not the 50s. And that's fine. You could tell me it is, but I know it's not.
Yeah.
That's part of the dreamlight state of this movie, I think, but not in a good way.
So like unrealistic way.
What's interesting is that this movie was filmed and released in 1989.
Yep.
Set 30 years prior. So this is for those audiences, this is the equivalent of us watching a movie set in 1989. So to those audiences, this is more recent than Stranger Things is to us.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
Interesting.
Tough to wrap my head around that.
Isn't that weird? I thought about that similar thing when I watched Close Encounters of the Third Kind recently. Because that's set in the mid-70s and they find a downed World War II plane and they're like, oh my gosh, it still works. But based on time alone, it would be crazier for us right now to find a downed plane from the 70s that still works. That's a longer stretch of time.
Yeah, right. Crazy way to think of it.
Yeah. That's funny.
Yep.
Weird.
Time. Flat circle moves
Keeps
every
circle. Keeps moving. Yeah, there's stuff like that in this movie that's just like, speaking of the desk set with the plastic wrap apparently doesn't work very well because the second they throw it off the roof, everything scatters.
You got to think it was a one take thing, right?
Yeah, probably.
And they might not have expected that.
It's not high velocity resistant. It just shredded the second that he let that boy fly.
It was dissolvable. It was dissolving in his hands as he was holding it. So I love the setup that the different boys get for their different journeys in this movie, the different things that they overcome, the different lessons that they learn. And I think you can make a pretty solid argument that there's four main
I wish I could have seen more Pitts and Meeks.
Yeah, particularly Pitts. I like him a lot.
Yeah,
but
he was fun.
We sort of have Knox, we have Charlie, we have Neil, and we have Todd.
Yep.
And so before we get to Neil and everything that's going on there, I'd love if we could talk about sort of where the other ones sort of go on their journeys just briefly.
Yeah, just a little bit, yeah.
So Knox kind of goes from, I don't want to say no confidence, but just an unwillingness to step outside of his comfort zone to get the things that he wants, I think is the lesson that we're learning here.
And Knox's, his seemed the more, like if we're trying to pair up like poet to all four of these guys, he's the most Shakespearean, it feels like.
Sure.
Because he's, fawning after the girl that he's in love with.
He's over the top and willing to do crazy things.
Yep.
And I agree with that. Charlie is an interesting character to me. He was one of my favorites in this movie.
Yeah.
And I thought I would hate him at the beginning.
That's interesting that we set him up like he's going to be the villain of the Dead Poets Society, but then it turns out to be
kind of the hero,
the quiet guy in the background the whole time. Yeah. Who's not buying into it.
And Charlie is funny. He is daring and he is charismatic.
Yeah.
And his lesson, we kind of talked about it a little bit. He learns to channel that into a healthier place, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But man, his joke on the phone call of, hey, it's God. He says we should have girls at Welton. That was so funny.
It's really good.
Yeah, it really was funny. And when you're talking about how he's realizing, how did you phrase it? Like what he's learning?
I feel like he's channeling his charisma and his rebellious streak into a healthier channel.
Yeah, the saxophone scene is feeling more and more like a little snapshot of exactly what he's doing.
Yeah.
Because at the end of this, he's actually playing something pretty melodious that the guys are like, oh my gosh. There seems to be like kind of these aha moments for almost all of them.
Well, and that's what I'm talking about with it's this group of guys that are spurring each other on creatively. When he does that and they all sit in awed silence, they're not like, oh, you play, and I love, he kind of did it with, he says, I took the thing that I had learned, clarinet, which I didn't like, and I applied it to the thing I love now, which is sax.
Yeah.
He's doing the same thing in his life, which is very cool.
Yeah.
Then we have Todd. We actually don't get much of a journey from Todd, I don't think.
No.
We get new guy, discovers a passion, and then stands up for what he believes in at the end. But we don't see any evidence that he wouldn't stand up for what he believes in earlier.
Right.
That kind of plays into my super dump with Ethan Hawke a little bit, I think.
Sure.
I think there's almost too many kids in the Dead Poets Society to keep track of in this kind of way. It's really, really hard. It's really hard to manage an ensemble cast like this and give everybody their own arc, their own journey to overcome.
Right. But we focus so much on Todd. That's why it feels like a letdown.
It does.
To
that
me.
feels weird. Yeah.
But I think those are the four main boys. And then we have Neil.
Do you guys think that we're supposed to interpret Neil as like a second Keating, the second coming of Keating? Because I got the vibe that Keating sees a lot of himself in Neil. Because Neil seems to be the one that is encouraging these catalytic moments for the other guys.
I actually thought it was Charlie.
Really? It feels to me like Neil's leading the charge in those moments.
He is leading the charge, but when Keating talks to Charlie in that room, I got the vibe that he was seeing a lot of himself in Charlie in that moment, and that he didn't see enough of himself in Neil, and I felt like he kind of blamed himself for not knowing what to say.
Yeah. It could be that at least 3 of the 4, maybe all 4, are more of kind of like a horcrux of Keating.
I think that's a little bit.
That he's got a little bit, because we do even get just a little bit that he can reference back to Knox's love, because we just get this unnamed woman on his desk that he kind of looks at for a while. Just very brief there.
I think she farts in her sleep. It's the same wife from Good Will Hunting.
Yeah. Gosh.
So good. Kylie and I are watching that movie tonight because we're on a Robin Williams kick now.
Oh, you just trying to cry? A bunch of tears?
That's still my favorite one. But
cool. You got Patch Adams tomorrow night then?
Yeah, we'll see.
Jeez, dude.
I do want to talk about Neil, and I want to give it the proper amount of time, no more, no less.
Yeah.
Neil's story, I think it's hairy to get into this on the podcast for me, but like I definitely resonate with having a hard time balancing what you care about and father's approval. There's that.
Okay.
So that's as far into that as I'll go.
Sharing.
But like watching that, I felt for Neil a lot of this movie, just the conversations of, but I love this thing.
Yeah.
But it's not my plan for you. Okay, but that's fine. But I love this thing.
Yeah.
But that's not and I have been in that tug of war match many times with my own father. And like, I think that it was especially poignant watching him come to his breaking point, and I think made me thankful that that is not a route that ever appealed.
Crossed your mind,
yeah.
But man, it is. I have to imagine the actor that played his dad. I can't remember his name, but he's Red Foreman in that 70s show.
Yeah, can't unsee that.
He talked in an interview. I read this on IMDb about.
I heard about this.
Being at the premiere and watching a father and son bickering on the way into the premiere of this movie, and then as they left the movie, the dad was crying.
Yeah.
Oh man.
And it's just like these types of movies and these types of moments in movies. I feel like there's a lesson in everything in the whole world.
Sure.
And you can choose from a movie like this with what's happening to Neil. You can choose to take what I would call the wrong lesson away.
Yeah.
And that lesson is whatever you want to call, an escape, anything like that. That is the wrong answer, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
The right lesson that I think you can take is you can look at this father-son dynamic and you can say, I can be better than that. I can rise above that. I can treat my children or whatever. And I think as we watch this, that is where we are supposed to go.
Yeah.
But I want to be sensitive to the fact that I think it's easy to go any direction here. And so
it really is. And I mean, with something like suicide, it is, I don't know. It's black, white, gray. It's all, that's why it's so hard. We almost had to have a lot of conversation about how to even approach it.
Right.
Because there's some ways you could look at this and be like, oh, I don't know if they should have made it try and look poetic. It's not but it's not the same kind of thing to where we talked about, Bella Swan wanting to kill herself.
Right. It's not romanticized in the way the Twilight does.
Definitely not inappropriate like that.
Yeah, I think it is painted as a mistake.
It is.
In this movie, which I applaud.
Yeah. The thing that is just so I don't want to call it Twilight Zone because that seems to dilute it a little bit, but the fact that we have a scene where Robin Williams is mourning someone who committed suicide.
I know. Yeah. I know.
Breaks my heart.
Yeah, that was it for me.
It's heavy.
Oh my gosh. And it's not even foreshadowing. It's like this. And you felt like he felt real emotion there.
I know.
And it was like, wait, is this, I don't know. We're not going to psychologically try and break down his mind.
Right.
But
and that's sort of what I was talking about earlier is like this heightened sense in this movie.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's hindsight, but there is, in what Neil is feeling, there is a heightened sense of sadness. And when Knox gets the girl, there's a heightened sense of success. When Charlie plays the saxophone, there's a heightened sense of excitement.
I think that's what we're finding in high school movies, though.
Yeah.
Is that everything, and that's personal experience. Everything in high school is either a mountain or a valley, and there's nothing in between.
Right. And that's not to belittle the high school experience.
No,
I think
absolutely.
If anything, it's our hearts should be breaking that things feel that serious at that age.
Yeah. What is the actual name of the guy who is Cyclops in X-Men?
Isn't that James Marsden?
Yeah.
It's like before Mars. No. The fictional character's name.
Scott Summers.
Oh, Scott Summers.
It's like Scott Summers before he gets the glasses that can control those lasers.
Right.
That is what high school is.
Your eyes are either closed and nothing's happening, or they're open and you're destroying everything.
The world.
Right. No,
It's
really good.
yeah, so much like that. Just uncontrollable.
James Marsden's eyes are like that too. The real guy, James Marsden. Yeah.
They really
They're
are.
either closed or piercingly blue.
I happen to know for sure that we have a good number of high school students that listen to this podcast.
Yeah.
And I hope that they, in small ways, are realizing that like it's not all valleys and mountaintops, and there is middle ground, and things are okay, and they will be okay.
Things are okay in between. It's okay to be in between.
Yeah, and this is an important part too. I was just talking to some students at orientation, and it's a room full of 18 and 19-year-olds.
Right.
And it was like, I want you guys to have the perspective you will always hear, and I definitely heard it's like college or just academics in general this season is preparing you for the real world. Please don't be naive to the fact that right now is the real world.
Right.
Yeah.
Like what is happening right now is so pivotal to your growth in general. Yeah. And so don't make it one channel. Like be open to experiences and all that kinds of stuff and getting to discover yourself. It's not so much about that diploma. And again, that doesn't sound like a thing that a professor should say too much, but it's
it's good.
Do what you're supposed to do, but I mean, this is a great place to grow. There is never another point in your life outside of like going to driver's ed that someone has specifically put aside a season of your life to get past and then move on.
Right.
Once you're past school, there's no more dedicated time to you figuring anything out.
Right.
Unless you decide to or pay for it.
Right.
So it is, yeah.
Well, I don't want to run this into the ground for too long. I think it's important to us, and that's why we land here. But after the tragedy of Neil's death, Keating is blamed.
Yeah.
His irregular methods are blamed. And
which is such a reaction to mourning.
Yes.
And
you got to find... Well, and I think Charlie says it. They're going to blame somebody.
Yeah. It's got to be somebody's fault.
And we get, at the end, probably the most famous scene from this whole movie. The desk.
One of the more famous scenes in American cinema.
Yeah.
I
mean, how many times have you seen this parodied?
Oh, yeah. I had a student that asked if I wanted to be referred to as captain.
Really?
And I was like, sure.
Did you cry?
That's
funny.
A little bit. That's funny. So they stand on the desks and they give him one final, "Oh, captain, my captain." And I love that it's not the whole class.
It's
not
good
this,
that Todd's first.
Yeah.
Because Neil would have been first.
Right.
So.
And it's not this High School Musical, everybody does it because like, it's only some people. Some people stay in their desks.
And that was in some of the footnotes of the like trivia stuff is they thought at first, well, let's have them all do it. And they're like, no, it's probably more appropriate and realistic to not have everyone.
Yeah.
Right.
Just the dead poets do it.
Yeah.
Right. And I was expecting Charlie to show up again, by the way, after he gets expelled. He does not. He's just gone.
Nope.
He gone.
So.
Yeah. So a really interesting thing to me, and I'm glad that I read I tried to read trivia either in the first 10 minutes as the movie's starting or before, so that I can appreciate it as it's happening.
Right.
And to point that out.
Interesting. I'm an after the movie guy. That's interesting.
Yeah. So some of the actors would refer to, or people on set, I think it was mainly this cohort of boys, would refer to this movie as One Flew Over the Robin's Nest. Did you hear about this?
No.
And how much it's like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So Jack Nicholson's character is essentially Robin Williams' character, and coming into this environment that is held to these certain standards and kind of getting in trouble for making people believe and like fall in love with situations and think outside of that. And it's almost to where you could carbon copy some of the characters to exactly what they're going through. Except this side is full of people with mental disabilities. Yeah. And then this side is just full of a bunch of
high school
adolescent boys, right? But it's the same kind of setting. And even the villain, in fact, of like the main antagonist, the way that they're handling things, and they're just villainous based off of following rules that have been put in place by someone long before they were, and just enacting those rules and being proud of it. So I thought that was really interesting.
That's super interesting.
That is super interesting.
Super insightful from these young actors.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah. It really is. That's awesome.
They know their film history.
They do.
So the ending of this movie is powerful, and I feel like the best thing we can do to sort of respect it as it is to move on and rate this movie.
Yeah.
Right? Is it time for that?
It is time for that.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we here at Two Chunks and a Hunk have taken a school lesson straight out of Welton Academy. That's science. To create a scientific cinema scale. It's perfect, and it is as follows. The best thing we could ever say about a movie is own it, don't lend it.
Buy that poster.
The next best thing, that's going to be buy it, followed by rent it, and then stream it. After that is forget it, and last, but certainly least, the worst thing we could ever say.
God hath forsaken us.
I'll go first. I'm going to give this movie a strong buy it. This movie was surprising. It was poignant. It was sad. It was wholesome. It was happy. Like, this movie sort of brought a little taste of everything to the table. I laughed. I cried. Yep. It was awesome. Yep. I am a big fan of this movie, and I am confidently buying it.
For me, it's also a buy it. I think, and this is too, and I want to share like I know we always share the reasons behind it, but for me, something that this movie has pointed out is my opinion can change based off of just where I am in life. And I think that's what movies are for too. Like, art is supposed to adapt to how you're feeling in that moment. And I think because this is so much like I am in a school setting and the majority of my conscious life is at school. And in this setting, this meant a lot to me on many aspects, educationally and with my profession and just kind of who I hope to be like as a person. And so, I've talked about Robin Williams too. Chelsea let me know that he died as if it was family. Like, she called me. I remember where I was standing. And I don't think that sounds silly. I was going to say as silly as that sounds, but it was like, it was a big impact on me. And I think I'd only seen this once because sometimes these heavier movies, like he does a lot of these Good Morning Vietnam. Like, there's so many movies that he has that you just kind of have to watch, meditate, and just wait until it organically comes back, because I'm not going to just say, Friday night, Dead Poet Society. Like, not going to happen, but buy it for me.
This is going to be a really, really high buy it for me as well. I first watched this movie in my private school classroom, shown to me by an English teacher.
Wow.
Karen Watkins, who had just a huge effect on my life.
That's so cool.
So we watched this in class, like an hour at a time for the first or second week of school. And she, at the end of it, she was like, listen, guys, I know this is a movie and I know that it's like fictionalized, and I know he's the most famous teacher in American cinema. So I understand that what I'm about to say is cheesy, but in my class, I want you to find your verse. I want you to make your life extraordinary. I want you to carpe diem. And so this movie, probably, maybe not more than any other, but certainly in the top tier of movies that have had just a profound effect on me as a person. So high
That's
buy
really
it.
cool.
High buy it for me.
Yeah. I love it. I think at first when we looked at the landscape of back to school, there might have been a fraction of a second that it felt like putting this movie in here would be inappropriate. But I think after talking about it,
I think it's actually important.
Yeah, I think it's important.
Yeah, and school's not all clicks and sillies.
I know. But fortunately.
Speaking of clicks and sillies, though, next week, we're on the upswing of
our podcast is going to be clicks and sillies again.
Yes, it is. Yeah, next week, we're talking about Mean Girls.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, sir.
Oh, my goodness. It is a treat. A real treat.
100%. I can't wait.
Yeah, and I'm very excited about it. And since the movie we talked about this week is so heavy, it would feel inappropriate to make our closing gag about this movie. So I'm going to skip ahead a week.
Go for it.
To close out today's episode, I want us each to say our name and what clique we would belong to if we were in Mean Girls.
Can you give us a refresher on those cliques?
Nope.
Okay.
I don't remember them.
Great.
And this is based on who we were in high school?
Are now.
Okay. I'm going to go with were in high school.
That'll work too. For 2 chunks in a hunk, I'm Jordan. Wonders, that is. And I would have been a big old nerd.
I'm Doge, and in high school, I belonged to the Husky American Eagle Sneaker Cut Jeans Club.
No, you were a band geek, 100%.
I was not a band geek. I played drums. They're different.
In what?
In the drum line. It wasn't part of the band.
You're a band geek.
I promise you it wasn't part of the band.
That's exactly what a band geek would say.
No, dude, I was a drumline boy. I'm sorry. We won state 4 years in a row.
That's exactly what a band geek would say.
I'm sorry. I qualified for state on a solo 3 years in a row.
Whoa!
I'm sorry. I'm not a band geek. I'm the band geek.
Oh, and I'm Carter, and these guys don't know this until just now, but the amount of cosmetic surgery I had before my 16th birthday was wild. So I would have been a part of the plastic.
Sure, naturally.
And we can get more into that next week. But
that's why you look so much like Ken the Barbie.
That is why. You're realizing now none of my joints have ever moved.
Did you say Ken the Barbie?
Ken the Barbie. You know Ken the Barbie from Barbie?